My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today I have a good friend of mine from university who is now a big shot, and he's forgotten all of us, but just kidding aside. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Jey Balachandran, and I know some of you might know him, but he is the Chief Technology Officer at Doximity, which is a publicly traded company in the healthcare space. The story for me is really fascinating because he was an early employee. I forgot which number, but I'm sure Jey will clarify. And he started there about 11 years ago, and here he is today. So Jey, welcome to the show. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you, Era. Yeah, it's been a while since we've met up, but me and Era, we spent a lot of time together back in college at U of T. I say mostly at university library. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, it seems like a lifetime ago. It's crazy because obviously Jey was born and raised in like the Toronto area, but I feel like he's been there. You've been at the US like 11, 12 years now, so I feel like maybe you feel more American than Canadian.
Well, I was actually born in Sri Lanka, but I moved down to Canada when I was 9, and I still feel I'm Canadian. I still hold on to my Canadian passport, but I've been here for 11 years at this point, so the U.S. is definitely starting to grow on me. But I'm in San Francisco, so I would say more San Franciscan than anything else in the U.S.
Awesome. Well, for me, everybody I talk to, it's always the beginning. Always seems to influence where you are today, and especially now that I'm a dad, I can see how they can play out. It's a long game. So I guess for you, Jey, tell us about like how you were raised. Like you said, you were born in Sri Lanka. You came here a bit later than me. I came here when I was 3, like to Toronto when I was 3. You came when you were 9. How did your upbringing influence, your eventual, desire or passion for technology and building products?
Yeah. So as I said, I moved to Canada when I was 9 with my whole family, and we stayed initially in Mississauga, and then kind of moved around to Scarborough, North York, and then we ended up back in Mississauga after a while. I wasn't really introduced to technology much in Sri Lanka besides having a TV. I think when I came to the Canada and saw a computer, I was very fascinated by it. I think my dad and my brother went and purchased our first computer. We had it, and I would get a little bit of time here and there. And to be honest, I just got fascinated by the games that I can play on the computer, just like any kid, and that got me really interested in it. And a couple of years after that, I was playing a bunch of games. I wanted to learn how they worked, and I leaned on my older brother to show me and tell me how these are made, with programming languages. And that's what kind of began my journey. I wouldn't say, prior to that, I ever thought much of technology or that I would be really getting into it. But I got just pulled into that world where I realized I can build things from scratch, over a course of a day or weeks, and kind of see it, come to fruition.
So like going back to, I guess, our U of T days, it's crazy because I remember, I think, I could be wrong, but I think one of your first jobs out of school, or like even while you were in school, was with the government. And that seemed like a lifetime ago. And now, like, you're CTO, like you're not maybe as actively in the day-to-day building of the product, but I guess just reflecting on that, first of all, when you went to Doximity, were you employee number 5? I remember you telling me that, but maybe I mixed up the number.
Employee number 7, I think.
Oh, wow. So and how big is the company now?
A little over 800 people.
Wow, crazy. How have you seen the company
grown quite a bit?
How have you seen the company evolve or change, like just even culture, or just the kind of people you're seeing now from when you started, obviously, as employee number 7?
Yeah, it's certainly changed a lot, and in many ways it's still very much the same, or I feel that it is. One of the things I loved about the company in the early days was it was fun experience to work there. There was stressful moments for sure, but it felt better knowing that your colleagues were there to support you and you can work with them. And that notion hasn't changed to this day, and I love that aspect of it. So yes, we've grown drastically, being at over 800 people at this point. I wish I can say I know everybody at this point by name, but it's kind of beyond the ability to remember that many names and faces at this point. But every time we meet up in person and get a chance to talk to people, it feels so collaborative and enjoyable to work with this group of people that it does remind me often of the early days when there would be 10 of us crammed in our small house, working on a problem. That cultural aspect of it still remains. I think the biggest changes are we just have to learn to scale how we innovate and how we build over time as the company grew out. The same things that worked when we were a company of 50 or 100 or 300 wasn't going to work today, and we just have to be willing to accept those changes and move forward, knowing we're going to discover new and better ways of working together over time.
I know I kind of jumped into it before because I have context on what Doximity is, but maybe the audience doesn't. But I guess the way I would describe it, and you could correct me, is kind of like a LinkedIn for doctors where they can kind of connect, collaborate using technology instead of kind of the old school ways of doing that. Is that about right, or has it kind of evolved, or am I completely off?
No, you're not completely off, but that is part of the story. I think ability to connect with other physicians is certainly important. Being able to look up another physician, say you wanted to refer a patient that speaks Spanish in Texas, you should be able to look that a physician up very quickly and be able to refer the patient there. And so that directory component is very valuable for that. But it's also about workflow tools. The physicians have a very different workflow than the rest of us, and we need to make sure it's as efficient as possible for them. So we focus a lot on building workflow tools that really enable them to do care a lot better for people like us. So some of this, given it's a little bit more popular these days, is telemedicine. And that certainly is one of our workflow tools. But others also exist. For example, physicians need to stay continually educated on different topics. So we call that continuing medical education. And we provide ways for them to do that very seamlessly as well. So it's a lot of different workflow tools like that that really enable the physician to do what they really should be focusing on, which is on care for patients.
And, you obviously mentioned you're like in San Francisco and, you're as part of a very successful startup that's now, I would say, kind of obviously publicly traded company. In that area, you typically, often run into computer science grads from all over the place. So like MIT, Harvard, like, with the big programs. And I think University of Toronto, at least in Canada, is well recognized. But how did you, was the degree important when you started to kind of work at Doximity and as you kind of rose up the ranks, or was the degree and kind of where you did school not as important versus kind of the work experience you had? Like, what was your experience like there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I would say
this episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
The answer to this, it really depends in your field. I think computer science is a very unique field in the last decade where a lot of people have been able to pick up that skill regardless of their background, regardless of where they went to college or if they went to college, with a lot of successful boot camps and online courses. So when I joined Doximity, they didn't particularly care where I had education, as long as I did, because it's required for the visa. And even to this day, especially in the engineering field, we don't particularly look into exactly where you went to school and grade based on that, as much as what you're able to bring to the job and what you're able to accomplish. That's what matters the most. So I certainly seen people from various different backgrounds, from MIT and Stanford to people just doing boot camps, and before that they did a completely unrelated field. I would say for majority of startups, it hasn't been that necessary that you went to a top school, as much as you have the skill sets and you have some experience to show for it. So I think, go ahead.
No, go keep going.
I was going to say, but outside of computer science, I think it might matter. I think computer science is a pretty unique one in terms of how much content that's come out that allows people to self-learn and learn with their peers and just build things out just to try it.
So I guess you as a technology leader, how do you instruct, or like how do you hire yourself? Like what kind of things do you look for when you're looking for someone that, maybe that works directly for you, or like maybe you're part of the interview process for like lower, like a higher, entry level hires as well. But like what do
Mhm.
you like? What do you look for?
Yeah, obviously, some kind of background in that technology area that we're focusing on definitely matters. So whether that is a particular web framework or a mobile framework, if you have some experience with that, that's going to matter. The other is your ability to solve problems. In the computer science space, uh, most problems you're coming up to and you have to figure out a solution for on the spot. Everyone Googles and looks on Stack Overflow. That's normal. We don't want to prohibit people from doing that. That's a normal part of software development. So we look for people that can solve those problems and they can work with others to solve those problems. Often at our company, we work in small teams. No one works, in a silo by themselves. So can you collaborate with your peers to build these solutions out together? And you're able to do some research, learn along the way to solve that problem. We're not necessarily expecting you to come in with the solutions to every problem. That would be unreasonable because we haven't even known what those problems are most of the time.
What have you noticed that's different? I mean, there's some obvious ones, but since you joined as employee number 7 and now you're the technology leader at
Mhm.
Doximity, how has your skill set have been forced to kind of evolve? Is that something you naturally had, or is that something you had to get trained or coached on? Like how did that evolution happen from being like a developer
Yeah.
to more of a leader?
Yeah, so I would say, thankfully, I had a lot of time to grow into that role. As I was, working at Doximity, I had a lot of opportunities given to me, which I'm very grateful for, to step into leadership slowly and step into different roles over time. And I would say a lot of the skills came from, many different places. There wasn't just, one source that kind of got me those skills. So some of it came from coaching from my colleagues, my mentors. Others came from reading and looking up resources. Others I got from going to conferences and listening to others speak. And a lot of them, I would say, I learned through failure, trying something, realizing it didn't work, thinking back on why that didn't work out so well and making sure I don't make the same mistakes twice. So I think I just had a lot of time to learn these things, and it didn't necessarily come from one source, but having the time to work through that really helped me shift my skill sets from being an engineer to being a leader at the company.
Was there anything that you thought the role was going to be? Like CTO obviously sounds like a very awesome, prestigious role, but obviously comes with challenges. The higher you kind of go, the more responsibility and challenges. Was there something you thought the job would be like, where it's not necessarily a negative, but just something that you didn't expect, that you would kind of have to deal with as a CTO, that you
Mm.
missed, that when you were like strictly a developer?
Yeah. Probably quite a bit. I think one of the things I realized over time with this role is to embrace chaos a little bit. Your day to day is not the same from yesterday to today, and new things will kind of pop up. I think one of the more recent things I've found a little surprising, but in hindsight, maybe not so surprising, is reading a lot of legal documents. I wouldn't say I had any experience with that, but it's a different thing to tackle. Just to read and understand some contracts and making sure things are worded the way we want. So there's a lot of surprises like that. Nothing bad. It just you just have to embrace. You're going to be learning new things even in that role, and you're going to be shifting from week to week into something totally different.
And I know I'm kind of focusing a lot on the hiring part of things as well, because just as you're
Mm-hmm.
talking, there's something that as you're talking about your change in role. So in the tech world, I don't know if the market has changed, but I feel like it's just because there's a shortage of talented or skilled workers, people are always constantly switching jobs, say every 2-3 years, to kind of obviously maximize on their earning potential, get better opportunities. So in that kind of market, especially you're in San Fran, and that's like a whole different like beast in terms of like, compensation and all of that as well. How do you compete against, the FANG companies or just other companies that are able to either pay them really well, pay like, employees really well, or like compensation or just other perks they can offer? How do you stand out, or how do you try to stand out from the competition?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So for one, I would say we've always had a very good mission at the company. We wanted to help physicians be able to provide care a lot better. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. So that certainly helps us. We have a lot of people that are working here that have family members that are physicians, or someone that's part of the healthcare space. And so that definitely helps. The other, I would say, is we were a remote company before that was a popular, fad or a term that everyone was using. So we've, had people in other countries working with us as full-time employees for a better part of 10 years at this point. So over time, we've learned a lot of the struggles companies have by having some people in office, some people remote, and we really ironed out some of those difficulties over time. So that is really, really, meaningful to some employees who do want to work remotely. They're not, applying to a company to join and have them figure out how to be remote overnight, but they're coming into a company that has successfully done remote work for a long period of time. So, I'll use, examples such as when the pandemic hit, a lot of companies struggled with that shift to going remote overnight. There was a lot of bad going on in the world, of course, but for us, we were able to switch to being, remote overnight, and it didn't really have an impact on us because we've always done this. We know how this works. We know what to look out for it. We know how to innovate under those conditions. So that was, very valuable. So I think those two things are the main things, that set us apart from other companies, comparing ourselves to the, the FANG companies in terms of what we can offer that's different.
And is that what made you kind of stay? Because obviously you're very talented and good at what you do, and I'm sure you've had many opportunities throughout the years at other, potential companies. But to be at I would say a tech company as on the development or technology side for 11 years is a bit more unusual, I'd say, these days. So I guess, is that part of the same reasons why you decided to stay and, at Doximity versus go elsewhere? Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I would say my reasons were totally different. I think those were good reasons for me. I wasn't necessarily thinking about, jumping to another company for any particular reason, because I was very happy where I worked. I felt fulfilled in what I was doing. I was very much a builder. I love building some of these products for our users, and I love the people that I was building it with. So none of those other things really mattered, because I felt, fairly happy with what I was doing, and I wasn't trying to go to another company hoping the grass is greener on the other side. The other side of it for me is I like to, be continually challenged to learn. I don't want to be doing the same thing for a prolonged period of time. I've had the opportunity here to continually learn and learn new things all the time. And that's what's really kept me going and kept me excited. I didn't feel like I was, stuck in the same role, doing the same thing for too long. There wasn't, hard lines I couldn't cross. And that's really kept me excited.
For someone thinking, whether they live in Canada or elsewhere, there's more global mobilization in terms of people leaving to go to other countries to find jobs. But obviously, there's a lot of unknowns about leaving, and you did that obviously, like you said, 11
Hmm.
years ago. Number one, what made you decide to, I guess, leave Canada for the US? And number two, now that you've been there for over 10 years, what are the differences you kind of observed from like a professional and personal point of view between Canada and the US, if you see anything?
Yeah, yeah. So what made me leave? So I wanted to work on certain technologies, and when I was applying for jobs with companies that were working on those technology, there were very, very few of them. And even then, they weren't that attractive to me as a place I wanted to work. And this was in Canada, in Toronto in particular. So I was struggling with that for a while, but I kind of let it be until I got a call from a recruiter to come work at a few different companies in San Francisco. And I remember the call so vividly just because it was a snowstorm that day, and I was just fed up with the drive back home to Mississauga from downtown Toronto. So I was very interested in. I interviewed with a few companies, and they were all doing the stack that I liked, and I wanted to work there. So I kind of picked up and made the decision right then and there, without really giving it that much more thought. Now that I've been here for some time, I certainly noticed differences, but I'm not going to generalize to say US versus Canada because I haven't obviously lived in all parts of US and Canada. So I'll talk about Toronto, where I lived most of my life, and San Francisco, where I've been for the last 11 years. So I think working in the tech space in San Francisco, it's incredibly fast paced. And it's always about what you're going to do next and what you're going to build next. And it doesn't really stop. And I think that's one of the more notable differences that I noticed compared to Toronto, which I would also consider relatively fast paced, but this was on another scale.
And that's on a
Um,
professional
Go
level,
ahead.
yeah. No,
Yes, it's on a professional level. So that was one of the biggest differences. Other differences I noticed, San Francisco is a great multicultural place, but it doesn't compare to Toronto. I still love Toronto for the food options because there's such diverse food options there. In all different price scales that you can kind of go to and enjoy. So I do miss that aspect of Toronto. In terms of other differences between Toronto and San Francisco, I would say San Francisco is a smaller city. I think the population is somewhere around 750,000, 800,000. So it feels very small. And when majority of the people are in tech, that's kind of all you hear sometimes, which sometimes can be a little tiring when you're sitting at a coffee shop and you overhear someone talking about a technology and you know all about it, and then the next person's talking about that. So it does feel, pretty much like everyone's doing the same thing in some ways, whereas in Toronto, there was a lot more diversity around that. So I'd say those are I guess, the differences that I see. But they're very different cities, and I can't speak for the rest of US and Canada.
yeah, because I mean, I visited San Francisco a few times, so I haven't lived there like you. But one thing I heard from
I
people,
actually recall you came by our office.
did I come by the Doximity office?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man.
you did a
Oh, I
long
did.
time ago.
Yes, I did. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yes, I did. Wow, that was a long time ago. Because I think you were living in San Mateo at the time. Okay, I do remember.
Hmm.
Um, a comment that I met with somebody else on that trip, and they had said, you kind of mentioned the coffee, the coffee shop comment of
Yeah.
everyone is kind of in tech,
Hmm.
and also the price, the price of everything, housing, just things have gone up.
Oh yeah.
So just people in tech can mostly afford to kind of live there. Do
Yep.
you feel like you've seen San Francisco change where I think Toronto kind of has a similar problem, but maybe not as bad just yet? But like you don't have the lack of diversity of careers or people. So like it just feels like it's very homogeneous in terms of like just tech. So you don't hear things about the arts or like other kinds of jobs or fields. So yeah, just curious about that.
For sure, 100%. I would say it's only gotten more homogeneous over the years, and I've noticed it in the 11 years I've been here. And yeah, you're right. It has a lot to do with cost of living. It's incredibly high, even when you work in tech. So the people that can afford it are the people in tech that are choosing to stay, and the people that can't have, moved elsewhere where it becomes more affordable, which has, exacerbated the problem quite a bit. So yes, 100% agree with you there.
What's one thing from Toronto that you would love to bring to San Francisco? Like,
can I say quadroti?
I think you're gonna say mutton rolls, but yeah.
Mutton rolls is a close second, yeah.
I guess you don't miss the winters then, based on your earlier comment to it.
No, I do not miss the winters. I mean, I like winter for snowboarding and other winter sports, but I can do a relatively short 3-4 hour drive to Tahoe and do that during the winter. So I definitely don't miss that.
Another big thing, I guess, for you as well, from like, I guess it's professional and personal, is, Doximity going public. And like I said, I think that's like a remarkable experience. I talked to somebody else who was employee number 2. Their company isn't public yet, but like fast, like huge growth in like a decade. So it's like a very, you might hear about it in the news all the time, but for people, it's a very rare event, I think, for somebody to kind of see what you've seen. So like, I guess when plans started going in motion to kind of for Doximity to go public, and then obviously you experiencing it, just tell us all about that experience. I mean, is this something I don't think a lot of people will see? Maybe in San Francisco, it's like very much an outlier where like you have a lot more people than normal that go through that. But I just think it's very fascinating. So just maybe tell us about that.
Yeah. So going through that experience was definitely surreal. I think I learned a lot about the process, which was, eye-opening for me. But I would say it was definitely stressful leading up to it. So I'm very thankful that my routines in my life is back to normal after that. But it was definitely a very great experience. I remember the night before I was going public, I could not sleep. I was kind of up all night, completely anxious, thinking about all the things that we need to do or didn't do. And I think the next day I crashed at like 8 p.m. We had an event. I backed out of it early and just went to sleep because I was so exhausted going through that. But it was a great experience to, be there at the New York Stock Exchange to kind of see on the inside. We were very lucky because a lot of it was closed for the pandemic, and they kind of recently opened some aspects of it. So we were able to be there instead of doing something, virtual or something along those lines. So it was a great experience to go through that. But I would say I'm just very thankful we're a little bit past that experience, and I can be a little bit less stressed and have my routines being back to normal.
Were you like not allowed to tell anybody like you guys were going public that day, or like was some information shared and then like, or like were just people supposed to just wake up to that day being, it's going public, or is your information shared ahead of time as well?
Yeah, so if I recall, some information is shared in terms of the date, but it only comes out, certain amount of days before.
Okay.
So it's not released early in advance. Obviously I had access to some of that information and I had to keep that quiet, but some of that information doesn't come out till a couple of days before.
And like, how did your life change after that, that event? Or like, I guess because it is a culmination of 10 years of your hard work, your, big life choice you made. So how did your life change?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say I feel relieved. I think that's been the biggest change because it's 10 years of something you were working on. I wouldn't say working necessarily towards, but working on. And the public is going to make its mind up on how it was, matter of an hour or days, and that's stressful. So I definitely felt relieved knowing it was received pretty well. Outside of that, I would say the biggest thing that changed, around that time was the fact I was now working from home, and this was mostly because of the pandemic. And I found that incredibly, enjoyable to get, an hour to sit down for lunch with my wife or to take my dog for a walk. And that was the best part about this experience, where I was able to, be at home, be in my element while still, getting work done. But outside of that experience, I wouldn't say it changed that much. If anything, I just feel relieved that we were able to successfully go through that experience.
I guess my real question is, did you buy an island after this experience, Jay?
No, I did not. I did not. I did buy. I'd say my splurge purchase was a Dyson hairdryer, which I really wanted. So I ended up getting that.
And like after going through all this experience, the natural tendency is for like human beings to like, you experience some level of success. Do you see
Mhm.
yourself doing something different, not like necessarily in the short run, but in the future, like maybe even starting your own company, or like is that something that is not, I guess in terms of self-awareness, is not something you want to do, and you kind of enjoyed, this kind of thing, just kind of being a builder and helping company kind of grow and scale its technology.
Yeah, I would not necessarily consider myself an entrepreneur in that nature, where I want to kind of start companies or projects, purely on my own. Like yourself, Era, I would say I'd rather be part of something than necessarily start something completely on my own. So I don't necessarily foresee myself ever building a startup. I don't think that's necessarily been my interest. I always loved building something, and that's why I enjoy being at Doximity so much, where I can kind of focus on the building aspects of it. So I guess that's my answer. I don't really see myself starting something on my own in the future.
And obviously, your choice to leave Canada and, join Doximity when you did and kind of continue to stick it out paid off in just like all aspects. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time, I feel like this kind of thing of like leaving or like, going to work in San Francisco was less popular choice, I would say 10, 11 years ago. Did you ever hear any, you know, I guess, maybe it was friends or family kind of be like, hey, Jay, are you sure you want to be doing that? Is that like the smart choice versus doing what everyone else does? Like, did you ever hear any of that um, out of
Yeah,
curiosity?
yeah, definitely. So
Money can be hard to come by, but here is a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
obviously, my family was a little worried. I didn't know anyone in California or even the West Coast, so I was packing my bags within 2 weeks and moving down there. And that was a big change for myself, and they were used to me being home with them, so that was a big change, and I know they worried about it and stressed about it. So it was mostly around that, and not necessarily about the career choice itself. Of course, joining a small startup also makes people a little worried. It comes with certainly a lot of risk, but that wasn't the main focus. I think my parents didn't want me so far away. But when it comes to friends, I think most of my friends were very supportive. I think they certainly, use it as an opportunity to come visit. So that was great. And I still have a lot of friends back in Toronto, so I still kind of come back and visit. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, yeah. I think Gobi was working at Doximity as well, right? For a little bit.
He did come down and work with us for a little while.
That's awesome. What's like been a failure? I don't like the word failure. Let's say learning lesson that you've experienced in the last 3 to 5 years. And like, what was the thing that you learned?
Whew, so many. I guess if I had to sum it up, they're probably all based around a similar theme. I would say it would be around making too many assumptions and maybe making those assumptions way too early. I think um, I need to learn to be comfortable taking more risk as long as there's reasonable safeguards. And I necessarily didn't do that all the time, and so making assumptions way too early without the facts to necessarily back it up can definitely lead you in the wrong direction. And I think those would be the summary of all the little and big things that's kind of happened over time.
So Jay, I guess if we're like reflecting back, if you had a
Hmm.
chance to go in a time machine and talk to 16-year-old Jay, What would you tell him?
Uh, take those risks. It'll be fine. I think I was very, cautious. And I think, me moving from Toronto to San Francisco being one of the few exceptions of taking a risk, I didn't take too many. And I think uh, I could have taken a lot more and things would have been just fine, especially when you're young, where you have the time and the energy to be doing those things. So that's what I would say. Things will be fine. It'll work out. Don't stress about it too much and take that chance.
And in terms of your like personal legacy, how would you want to be remembered by your friends and family? So this is looking forward, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird question. I would not uh, think of it as any kind of legacy, but if there's a way I would want friends and family to remember me, I would say it's hopefully that I had a good time and I was happy. I think that's what I strive for with things that I do. So that would be the legacy I hope they remember me for.
Awesome. Well, I think it's a good way to segue into the final portion of the podcast. It's something I like to call
Hmm.
creator confessions. So I'm going to
Okay.
say a bunch of statements and you just, I guess, tell me what pops into your mind.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. So favorite Tamil food. You already know this.
Yeah, it's kotroti. Kotroti for sure.
Something that scares you.
Uh, Snakes.
Me too. Insecurity that
I
you
think
have.
growing up in Sri Lanka, you end up seeing a lot of them. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you told me about those stories, and I'm just like, I doesn't make sense how they move around with no legs, so it breaks me up. An insecurity that you have.
Public speaking.
Wow, we have a lot of the same answers. Okay. Favorite show you're watching.
Favorite show I'm watching. So just a couple days ago, I started watching The Gilded Age. I think it's on Apple TV or sorry HBO Max. Uh, it takes place during the Gilded times in New York, and I find it kind of funny. They get so upset with each other, but in very proper English. So it's kind of hilarious to watch.
Somewhere you're itching to travel to now that things with the pandemic are seems like mostly over.
Oh, I can't wait to travel. It's been very little of that over the last few years, obviously. A lot of the places I am itching to travel to, I'm going to get a chance to go in the next couple of months for my honeymoon. So Portugal and Spain are probably and Croatia is at the top of my list.
Good list. Uh, Another Tamil creator out there you want to give a shout out to?
I gotta say, you, Era. I think I've been amazed by what you built of this brand. I remember when you started this out such a long time ago,
Oh, the launch
and I
party.
was
You were
one,
there. Yeah, you were there at the launch
yeah,
party.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like wondering what you're doing, but I came there just to support you as a friend, just to see this, balloon up into what it is today, with all these speakers coming on the program and all the content you've been publishing. So, yeah, I got to give a shout out to you.
I'll take it. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
A favorite child, like I guess your favorite childhood memory.
Favorite childhood memory. Okay. So I remember bits of this, but we used to have rabbits back home in Sri Lanka. So my mom would take me outside and would kind of hang out with them, and I vaguely have these memories of them running around and me getting to pet them.
That's awesome. That's something definitely about Sri Lanka, the stray dogs and like just the wildlife. You
Oh
don't get that
yeah,
here.
yeah, exactly. No, not quite.
Something you like to do for fun outside of work.
Something I'd like to do for fun. I guess the cliche answer would be eat. I love food from all cultures, all types. So just going and experiencing different kinds of food is great. Beyond that, I'd say just being outside. Honestly, getting some sun, walking around. one of the fun things we do on the weekends is just walk through our city, and I very much enjoy that casual lifestyle experience.
What's like, for someone listening, I should have asked you actually earlier, but what's like your go-to places to eat, like one or two spots that you're like, you have to eat if you come to San Francisco, like, or like, I guess close to wherever you live?
Okay, so if you're coming to San Francisco, so I would say going to the Mission area and getting a burrito there is what I would recommend. It's even called the Mission Burrito, where it's kind of where it originated in San Francisco. So it ends up being a lot of different things packed into a burrito. So it's like a piece of log that you're eating, but it's so good. I'd say my favorite place to get a burrito is Taqueria Cancun, just in the Mission. Worth checking out. Not much of a sit-down place, but the burritos are amazing.
I love burritos, so it'll be something to try.
For sure.
Your favorite movie of all time, and I'd be curious to hear your answer for like English movie and Tamil movie.
Well, Tamil movie, I haven't watched Tamil movies in a long time, so the movies I'm going to remember are very old. So I'm going to go with Basha.
Yes, classic.
Classic, right? For English movie, that's tough. I'm going to go with The Sixth Sense.
Oh, interesting choice. Okay, that was a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I haven't watched Tamil movies as much, but I got into it more recently. And actually, Mahi has been sending me like some good recommendations. So I've been like, following his recommendations. So they've been pretty good.
Good. Yeah, I'll have to hit him up.
Yeah, he knows his movies. I think you kind of answered this before, but I want to hear another answer. So, what's a purchase you've made, you splurged on recently in the last few years that you have no regret about?
That's a tough one. I got a pair of sunglasses that I really wanted.
If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have?
The regret I would have is not getting more time to spend with family and friends.
A person or celebrity that you look up to?
My wife, Angeles.
A book you've read or a podcast you've listened to recently that's had an impact on you?
Can't say anything comes to mind right now.
A new belief, behavior, or habit that's improved your life?
Meditation and better breathing.
Celebrity whose life you'd want to experience for just one day?
Barack Obama.
That's a good one. And finally, what's a piece of advice that you would give to your fellow aspiring Tamil creators out there?
One thing I was, debating, whether to do was speak in a podcast like this. Mostly because, I, don't like to put myself out there too much, but I do think it's, important for others to hear about, other Tamil people and what they've kind of gone through and what they can do and have achieved. So if there's any advice is to break out of your comfort zone and do more of this to show what's possible and what the other Tamil people have done.
Love it. Thank you, Jey, for jumping on the podcast and kind of sharing your journey from employee number 7 to CTO of a publicly traded company, which is a remarkable journey. For somebody listening and they hear your story and they're inspired, maybe they want to reach out. Maybe they're also thinking of going from Canada to the US and they want to just reach out to pick your brain. What's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn for sure. Though I would say send a message or some note. Otherwise, it might get lost in some of the spam. But LinkedIn would be the best way.
Well, thanks again, Jey, for jumping on the podcast and sharing your story. For the audience listening, I appreciate you guys as always.